Chapter 24. Starscream entered Yakan through the subsurface tunnel network that serviced the energy conduits from the Kalis reactor. He had seen the combat camera records of the various hit-and-run engagements that had taken place along the course of the conduits. What the whole area needed was a solid cycle of seeker bombardment. That would take care of the tunnels and the conduit once and for all. Megatron refused this initiative, however. He wanted to keep Yakan as intact as possible for as long as possible, since he envisioned it as his future capital just as it had been capital for the other primes dating back to the time of the ancients. To Starscream it seemed as if Megatron wanted to manipulate the idiot underclass of Kon while aspiring to the situation of the upper classes. He had begun as a revolutionary and become a hypocritical tyrant. Which was fine. Starscream had no philosophical problem with tyranny. He planned to be a tyrant himself. The only problem was that Megatron's inconsistencies tended to send his subordinates out on highly inefficient missions, such as this one, while he ignored much more direct paths to military success. Such as, for example, destroying the conduit and tunnels. But this was not to be, so rather than fight their way through the tunnel, Starscream and his 6 air commanders moved quickly and silently, fighting only a single brief skirmish when they encountered a sentry in wheeled out form, late on his rounds. The concentrated fire of the 7 Seekers blew him apart into fragments of chassis before he even knew they were there. A single wheel skipped and bounced away down the tunnel in front of them. "Move," Starscream said. "There will be records of that. We should be out of this tunnel system before anyone comes to look." 2 cycles later, they cut their way through a tunnel wall and were into the main subsurface levels of Yakan. Starscream looked at his locator. The code key of power was in a lockdown and heavily guarded safe complex directly under the symbolic spires of the tower complex housing the High Council chamber. Megatron himself led another team into Yakan, entering through a collapsed viaduct that had once fed out-formed traffic from the city center out onto the main Yakan Hydrax road. In a small but pleasurable irony, this was the same road he and Orion Pax had traveled when first they came to Yakan together. How times and circumstances did change. They moved quickly and avoided engaging the few Autobot units they saw, despite the raging dark energon within them, which made them want to seize every opportunity for battle. For this mission, Megatron had picked only the most dedicated of his followers, the ones who had been with him from the beginning and never shown any sign of wanting to advance. They fought for him, no more and no less. Soon after their initial penetration of the Yakan perimeter, the team found the access shaft where Soundwave's latest information told them the plasma energy chamber would be. Catalican, the most reluctant member of the team but a necessary one, also had said that the code key of power was recently moved. His most recent information suggested that it was being kept near the plasma energy chamber itself. When he had heard this, Megatron had pushed up the mission timetable. He could not allow the possibility that the Autobots might locate and deploy the plasma energy chamber. Such a change in the balance of energon supply would prolong the war indefinitely. They were very close. Megatron held the team up, scanning on all frequencies to assess potential opposition in the spaces ahead. The access tunnel they had taken this far was wide enough for 2 Decepticons to march abreast. Ahead a much wider space loomed. None of Megatron's sensory arrays could detect its boundaries. No energy sources or sparks registered within. He gestured the strike team forward, but on a slow advance, all weapons deployed, rules of engagement to not fire first but to put down any hostile unit with extreme prejudice. They entered the perimeter of the server space surrounding the great computer Teletron 1. The heart of Cybertronian science and still its greatest product, the living mind of the planet and the well of information architecture that ultimately ran everything from Yakan's Magalef system to the subsentient machinery that controlled Kon's blast furnaces and the mining bots that spent their service lives out in the asteroid belt cooking out trace elements from the alloys and bits of ore. Teletron 1, thought Megatron. The dark energon desire within him flared, and for a moment he wanted to destroy it. He restrained himself. He had learned over the course of the war not to destroy things before he had some idea of whether he would need them later. This was why Yakin still stood, and why he held back now as he led the strike team into the periphery of Teletran 1's inscrutable consciousness. The room was barely tall enough for the larger Decepticons to stand upright in. Megatron was glad he had not brought Devastator along, or even some of the more massive Constructicons. But what the space lacked in height it made up for in the other two dimensions. As far as Megatron could see in the dim light, the room extended, featureless in floor and ceiling save for two things. One was a progression of support pillars, each as wide as Devastator's leg. The other was, far away in the dimness, a glowing rectangular outline. "Surely," said Catalican, "this must be it." "We will find out," Megatron said. The Decepticons formed up and moved out onto the open floor, wary of possible ambush from any direction. The locator on Megatron's forearm said they were getting close. Very close. Close enough that he should have been able to see the secure enclosure where such a mighty artifact would surely be kept. "Yes," Catalican said. "That is the plasma energy chamber, within." "Upstart," someone said in the darkness. The shadows at the edge of the glowing rectangle moved. Megatron stopped and held up a hand to stop the rest of the strike team as well. From the shadows, moving slowly but with a sense of purpose Megatron would not have been able to imagine, stepped Sentinel Prime. Apparently this world still held a few surprises. "So," said Sentinel Prime, standing ready in the great empty space. "You are the one who calls himself Megatron." Megatron felt the waves of shock coming from the gladiators who had accompanied him. Sentinel Prime, alive and escaped. And, most difficult to believe, ready to fight? Starscream, thought Megatron. He has done this. He will pay for it. First, however, it was time to put an end to Sentinel Prime. After all, the Covenant called for only one Prime at any given time, did it not? "Before you accuse your subordinates, know that they are blameless," Sentinel Prime said. "I bear the blame for letting your Decepticon movement survive beyond the malcontent Badlands districts where it was born. All Cybertronians would have been better off had it been snuffed out there." Sentinel Prime moved to the center of the room, positioning himself between Megatron and the entrance portal to the interior of Teletran 1, where Catalican said the plasma energy chamber would be locked away. "My errors cannot be undone," he said, "but they can perhaps be atoned for. Your war ends here. Surrender and Cybertron will return to peace with you alive. Fight on and Cybertron will return to peace with you dead." "You have forgotten one possibility," Megatron said. "When I defeat you, the war will go on and I will be alive. But once I have captured the plasma energy chamber, the Autobots will not survive for long. So perhaps you are partly right on that score. Do you remember, far back before this war began, when you were still one gladiator boss among many in the murder pits?" Sentinel Prime asked. Megatron gave no answer, and Sentinel Prime went on. "Because I had heard of bots dying in these pits, I sent 2 of my officers to investigate. Their names were Bumper and Fastback. Do you remember them?" Still Megatron said nothing. "You killed them both," Sentinel Prime said. "To protect your organization, which you later started calling a revolution. But you were a killer from the beginning, Megatron. No matter what you call yourself now, you are still just a killer." "What if I did kill them?" Megatron asked. "What are 2 lives balanced against the misery of millions caused by your casts? Do you tell yourself that every time? Do you imagine that is what you will tell yourself when, at the last, Optimus Prime has you at the end of his sword?" "Optimus Prime is a librarian." Megatron snarled. "The High Council signed the death warrants of every institution in the Cybertron of old when they named him Prime. He was a stooge of Alpha Trion, and now he is a stooge of whatever council members still live." Megatron drew his great sword, feeling it manifest from the fiber of his body. "And now, he said. I will speak to you no more, Sentinel Prime. For there is something inside Teletran 1 that I need to have, and you are in my way. Stand aside or die. Sentinel Prime's Energon sword blazed forth in the dim space. I am still Sentinel Prime, upstart, he said. I fought battles for the future of Cybertron before you were ever compiled, before your proto-form first crawled out of the well of all sparks. And I will fight battles after you are gone, Megatron. Thus the past becomes the future.
I'm glad you enjoyed that video/gameplay. Just remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, goodbye!